Hey everybody, what's going on? I've decided to put together a trim tutorial. These are going to be video shorts, 10 minutes or less. I'm going to try my best to keep them at 10 minutes or less. Go to my channel, subscribe while you're there, go to my playlist and look for trim tutorials. And I'm going to put a compilation of very specific things that you need to do to complete your trim. Now let's touch base on why you would want to do your own trim. 1, money savings. 2, pride of doing the job. And 3, so you can show it off to your friends. And the money savings is substantial. When you think about it, if you were to do baseboard moldings, case moldings, and crown moldings in each room in your house, you would be looking at somewhere around $700 a room. So if you add that up, it will average out to about $700 a room if you bring in a finished carpenter to do the job for you. And it's a job that you're perfectly capable of doing yourself if you're just a little bit handy. So if you take that into consideration, the tools that you may have to buy if you don't have a miter saw, or if you don't have a brad gun, or if you don't have something like that, when you're looking at a $4,000 or a $5,000 job to be completed, why not pick up the tools that you need and do it yourself and still save $2,000 or $3,000? It's pretty easy to do. Today we're going to remove the baseboard molding. I'm Jim Dirdorf and this is Detroit DIY. Let's get started. If you watched my video last week, you saw the tools that you'll need to remove the trim. Right now we're going to use the razor knife, and what we're going to do is we're going to cut between the top of the trim and the wall. The reason for that is there may be caulk in here or a buildup of paint, and if you try to remove the trim without cutting that, what'll happen is you'll rip the paper off of the drywall, and then you'll have drywall repairs to do. So spend a little time doing this, be meticulous, and make sure you get the top of this trim nice and free from the wall so that you're not ripping the paper off your drywall and causing yourself more work than you need to do. So we're just going to take the razor knife in here real nice, hold it as straight as possible, and run it through here. You don't have to worry about the top of the trim. If you're reusing the trim, when you recalk it, any nicks that you put in the top of the trim will be covered up with the caulk when it's all said and done. So we'll get this all cut loose. I'm going to run over it 2 times and just make sure that I've got it all cut. And you may leave a little mark on the wall like this. I'm sure if you're planning on replacing the trim, then you're planning on painting a room. Trim can really change the look of a room. It can make it pop. So it is a fairly inexpensive way to get a really nice look going on. I'm going to cut the rest of this trim loose, and we're going to get on to step 2. Once you have the top of the trim cut loose, we're going to take some painter's tape and we're going to put it on the wall just above the trim. And we're going to use that to mark the studs. If you plan on reusing your trim, you're taking your trim off per se just to replace some flooring or something like that, then the process is the same way. Now we're going to use the stud finder and we're going to locate our studs in the wall and mark them right here on this tape. I'm not sure what stud finder you may have, but this one you have to hold the button for a minute to allow it to calibrate before you start using it. That means that it's calibrated. So this is our stud. We have one right here on the corner. You'll always have one on the outside corner. And we have one right here on the inside corner. I don't need the stud finder for them. I know that they're there. In any construction, you will always find a stud on the inside corners and the outside corners. So you may be wondering why I decided to build this little mock-up, and I did this to emulate problems that you may run into: unlevel floors, off 90-degree corners, things like that. I can just better adjust this around and create problems that you might run into to show you how to work through them. So I've got my painter's tool, my 6-in-1, 8-in-1. I made a video on this tool. If you haven't watched it, you should. What we're going to do is we're going to start right here in this corner, and we're going to tap this in with our hammer and pry it loose a little bit. Not too much, just a little bit. Now we're going to give it a pry out. Not too aggressive. Then we'll move over to where the stud is. So right on the stud. The reason you want to be on the stud is so that when you start prying, the drywall is soft, and the harder you pry, you could poke a hole through it or cause other issues. So then we're going to move down to this corner. Now we'll start to see it opening up. Now we're going to use our trim pry bars. If you haven't watched my video from last week, the tools needed to remove trim, I explain all these tools a little bit in that video. So what we're going to do now is I have a little gap opened up right here. I'm going to just go ahead and slide my multi-tool in there, and then I'm going to put my pry bar in up against it so that I'm not prying on the drywall itself, but rather against the metal of this tool. And I'm going to give this trim a little pry. Now I don't want to get too carried away and break the trim, so I'm just going to move down a little bit and do that again. Nice and easy. Keep moving down. Try and get as close as you can to this stud. It's quite typically nailed on the studs. There we go. And then we'll come down here at this other stud. Now there's also nails along the bottom that may or may not be stubborn. So what we're going to do is just go ahead and get this side the rest of the way loose. I can see a nail right here down low, so I'm going to use the flat of my bar and reach in there and try and help that one out while I tug a little pressure over here on this corner. And there we have it. So I was kind of hoping this would happen. One nail pulled through. So I'm going to show you how to get that out without destroying everything here. This happens quite a bit. The nail stays behind, it pulled through the trim, and it stays behind. These pin nails, trim nails, any of these are not structural nails. The head is very small, and it's small for a reason so that the hole that it leaves is easy to patch. But this can also sometimes happen. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our painter's tool, multi-tool, whatever you may want to call it, and our side cuts. And we're going to get this nail down as low as we can possibly get it, and we're going to squeeze it. Not so tight that we cut it, but squeeze it tight enough to grip it so that you can pull it out of the wall. And then just work it out little by little. There we go. There's no damage to the drywall, no dents, no nicks, no nothing, and the nail is removed. We're going to do the same thing here, is mark the studs and then pry it off. When you're removing the trim, you kind of want to take a look at it and see which piece you may want to start with. If you have an outside corner, that is a fantastic piece of trim to start with, like what I did here. As you can see, it was coped over right here, so this trim would have been the most difficult piece to remove to begin with. So we took off the easiest piece first, and now it really doesn't matter. We're home free basically. Our stud's about right there. Right there. And then we have one down on the corner. We're going to start on this stud right here near the center, and we're going to just tap our painter's tool in, same way. Give it a little pry. Come down here to the next stud, do the same thing. Now this trim is pretty tight in this corner, so if I force it, it may damage the drywall slightly. So I want to come down to this end, which is already not contacting anything, and give it a little pry there. Get it far enough out where you can get your pry bar behind it, pry against your multi-tool. Same thing. Off she comes. Now I'm going to slide it right in. I can see the bottom nails now just by looking in there. Going to fight me down here a little bit, and there it is. Now I'm going to show you how to get these nails out of this trim if you want to reuse your trim. If you're just pulling your trim off because you're doing some flooring or something like that, and you want to reuse the existing trim that you have, and I mean this isn't a horrible trim, it's got a nice profile, and you want to reuse this, you may wind up with some of this going on. And I highly recommend you do not take a hammer and try to drive it back through the face, because it'll just splinter out and make a big mess on the face of the trim that you later have to fix. The best way that you can take these nails out is use your side cuts, grab a hold of them just like we're pulling it out of the wall. Now go ahead and force it right through the same way it came in, where you're pulling the head of the nail right out of the back of the trim, and it leaves a little splintered up mess. No big deal. You take your finger and knock it off the front of the trim. You can see that the wood putty was disturbed right here where the nail head was, but it's no big deal. This is easy fix. So that's how you get them out. And then it's about as easy as that, guys. If you have any caulking that is left on the drywall, you can go through and you can scrape it off a little bit carefully with a razor knife, or maybe you can even use your multi-tool and scrape that caulk off. If there's big issues on the side of the wall where the trim was before, because of so many layers of paint and whatever else may have taken place over time, you may want to consider buying a new molding that is slightly taller. Then you can clean that mess up and your new molding will cover it up, and no one will ever be any the wiser. The mess is gone and everything looks beautiful once again. Alright guys, that's all we got this time. Short little videos pinpointing specific things that you need to know to help you get your trim done and turn out a job that looks like a pro did it. Every Sunday I'm going to be putting up a new video. Subscribe, hit that notification bell, and let's get some trim work done in your house. If you enjoyed yourself, click on one of those two videos. They're going to pop up right there, and we'll see you soon. Thanks for watching.